Milwaukee from March of 2010. It looks like it's an underage drinking party. And when the officers come in, they find a bunch of people hiding, and they indicate they're about to do a search. And later there's people saying that they were being held in the home against their will. Kind of a weird comment to have on an underage drinking party. Ultimately, they find Mr. Anderson hiding behind an entertainment center. He's belligerent. He tells the police, "Fuck you, I hope you're proud to serve your country this way." He's then very coarse and his comments are obscene. He then urinates in a police vehicle and calls a female police officer a cunt. Inappropriate. Then we have the 2014 case that involves the mother, where officers are dispatched to a location. They enter the home, they see, they make contact with the mother. She indicates that her son was in the kitchen. Officers approach and the response is, "What are you gonna do, shoot me?" And he runs out the door. He then jumps into his mother's vehicle and apparently steals the mother's vehicle and drives off. The mother indicates that when she returned home from work, he was acting strange. He was sweating profusely. He argued, he punched a vase, he caused it to fall to the floor. She calls her ex-husband. He pushes the mother into a room and shuts the door. He prevents her from exiting. He then breaks the phone. He's continuing to scream and yell and throw things, at which point she calls the police. Ultimately, what we find is that he returns to the residence. He gets into a physical altercation with Mr. Foos. She's informed that he had crashed her vehicle into the deck at the rear of the residence and fled on foot. Ultimately, we find that the mother's fiance confronts Mr. Anderson and he throws that person to the ground. He's able to get back in the house and to prevent Mr. Anderson from getting in. He suffered 3 to 4 broken ribs as a result of the altercation. Ultimately, they have to meet with Mr. Anderson at the hospital because it appears he suffered a broken collarbone. He's convicted ultimately of disorderly conduct because he says Mr. Foos pushed him down the stairs as he tried to gather his belongings. It's interesting when you see Mr. Anderson's comment about that because he just says that Mr. Foos just poked him. Sounds like a bit of a discrepancy there. Then we go on and we find the issue with the grandparents. And the grandparents call the police and they say that he needs someone to talk to about his mental health and that he's smashing a glass in the sink, causing it to break. He goes in the basement, he punches a hole in the wall. He breaks the other phones. They have to go to a landline at a neighbor's, ultimately to call the police. It just sounds like he is to some extent out of control. He's ultimately on probation. He's given conditions of no drinking. He's given conditions of having anger management counseling. He tells the agent other people probably deserve to do anger management. I don't. He then goes on and tests positive repeatedly. To look at his explanations are ridiculous. At one point, he claims that he accidentally grabbed someone else's Red Bull that had liquor in it. But going through the repeated indication, it sounds like Mr. Anderson's the guy that does what he wants, when he wants, and he follows his own rules, not the rules imposed on him. And that's a frightening thing. You know, I read through the defendant's version of what happened. And it starts off by indicating that he was skeptical to meet with the pre-sentence investigator because he did not receive a fair trial. And there's no reason to believe that this writer's report would be fair or impartial. When asked how he accounted for his presence in the area where Ms. Robinson's vehicle was set on fire, Mr. Anderson said that he was set up. He stated he was in the area to buy marijuana, and quote, and all it would have taken was for someone to know where I lived and where I'd be in the morning, unquote. He would not tell the writer when or how he made the arrangements to purchase the marijuana, and then instead stated, quote, I plead the fifth. He then went on to point to things that he claimed were egregious errors at the trial. He claimed that there was a video that showed the photos on the phone and that the state only played stills of the video. That wasn't the evidence at trial. Am I correct?
Yes.
He claims that the still photo that showed his hand grasping Ms. Robinson's breast was part of a video, and it was only a still that was shown. Incorrect, correct?
You're correct.
Okay. He indicated that at trial it was flaunted, the difference in age. And when I read that, I was somewhat shocked because I didn't really find that that was pointed out at all during trial. I mean, it was mentioned how old she was, but other than that, I didn't think that that was in any way an issue, and it barely even made it into my notes. So my point is, I thought it was interesting how his view of reality seems different from what I find truly transpired. And I found it at numerous points during the pre-sentence investigation. You know, looking through this pre-sentence investigation, his viewpoints were very inconsistent with the reality. You know, I think the first issue relative to the mother's fiance, that was credibility. You know, it sounds like he lied to law enforcement. You know, he's asked, have you ever been involved in mental health treatment? Have you ever been in a mental health facility? Have you ever received treatment? He responds in the negative. But then we have the mother indicating that he was in an outpatient at Rogers. He indicates that he never made a suicidal attempt or had an ideology of SAID. But then we read about in the Navy how he was dismissed from the Navy due to a medical release, which appears to be related to the suicidal attempt in trying to hang himself. You have him saying about school, I did okay, but then you look at the history of how he did in school and his grades were pretty abysmal. Trial. And I didn't love her. I didn't know her, but you did. And that's a hard last thing to have in your minds. So I do understand how trials do re-victimize the victims. So when I look at the character of the defendant, I find the character wanting. When I look to the severity of the offense underlying this matter, I do sit in homicide court, and I can tell you on a daily basis, you don't understand why things happen. You know, almost every case, the victims come in and they want to know why. Why did it happen? Why did you have to do this? Why did you have to get to that point? And more often than not, there's no answer. We never know. It never makes sense. There's never do you walk away and say, oh, I understand why that transpired. It just doesn't happen. I can also tell you that, you know, I've read through all these letters and they talk about give us justice, right? Give us what's due. But I can't give you justice. There's no way you will walk out of here, no matter what I do today, and high five each other. There's no way you walk out of here and you say justice is served, because justice would be having Ms. Robinson back to you. Justice would be having her with you for the rest of your lives. And you never get that. You know, to hear about her, she was an innocent victim. You know, she was a girl that I would hope all young ladies strive to be. You know, to hear about working 2 jobs to reach her goals, to be going on for schooling and further education, but then to hear about how much she was loved in the community by almost everyone that touched her. You know, it was interesting to go through the letters because I got the letters that were from who I expected, you know, the mother, the father, the sister, the loved ones. I also got a letter from the real estate agent that worked with Ms. Scarborough. I got a letter from citizens. And I can't tell you, I really debated whether or not I would share this, but there was a letter from a citizen that doesn't know Ms. Robinson, never met her. And this is what he said, or she said, I don't know. The person signed it as Stargazer. In pertinent part, it says, Sade Robinson was not a torso. She was not evidence. She was a full, living, radiant human being. She had dreams, plans, and a future she was building with pride. She had people who loved her and that still love her, more than words can hold. And she had a right to live, to breathe, to laugh, to grow old. That right was stolen in a way so vile, so deliberate, that it tears at the fabric of what we call humanity. You, Maxwell Anderson, didn't just kill her. You carved her, and you discarded her like garbage. And you tried to erase her body from this earth piece by piece. And for what? Not even you had the courage to say. You sat there in court as if you were a man. You didn't snap, you planned. You didn't panic, you dismembered. And still you offer no answers, no remorse, no ounce of dignity that you stripped from her. But here's what you couldn't take. You could not mutilate her soul. You could not silence the scream of justice. You could not prevent an entire community from rising up in Sade's name. We know who she was. We know what she could have become, and we will not let your darkness define her. To the family, there are no words that can hold the weight of your pain, but I need you to know we see you. We mourn with you. We love you. You have the right to tears. You have the right to rage. You have the right to every ounce of justice this system can give. May you feel her arms in the wind. May you hear her laughter in your memories. May you know that she did not die forgotten, she died loved, and we will remember her always. Maxwell Anderson, you are not the center of this story. She is, and she will always be. Sade Robinson lives on in light, in truth, and in love. And you will be remembered only as a man who tried to destroy something beautiful, but failed. I thought that was beautiful. And I think that it shows the impact that this had on the community. That took time and effort and thought. And I think it put together a lot of what the community felt. So going back to what I need to look at. In formulating a proper sentence, I need to look at the character of the defendant. I need to look at the severity of the offense. To take away a child is horrific. You wouldn't wish that on anybody. To have a child not outlive the parents is a horrible thing. But not only did you extinguish her life, but you hid it, and you hid her body to be found. And I can only imagine every time a news report, every time something clicked that another body part was found, how it had to just re-victimize this family, how it had to just be like another shot to their soul. I can't imagine how horrific that had to be. And yet, I wonder which was worse, the not knowing in those first days where she was. I can't even think of a word, horrific. It's beyond imaginable for a parent to think of not being able to know if your children are dead or alive, and then to learn that they were dismembered and disgraced to the extent that this poor girl, her body endured, is beyond understanding. So the severity of the offense, I'll agree. It's definitely at the top of some of the worst homicides I've seen in this court. Looking at the impact on the community, I read that letter because I thought it stated to a great extent what we're here about. What my job is to do, it is to hold you accountable and to punish you. It is also to protect society. And that's about how do we figure out if at some point you're redeemable? How do we figure out if at some point you will change your mind mindset. You will get the therapy and education to be at a point where you will be safe to have in the community. Now, part of that goes into the fact that you don't take responsibility. You know, I listened to the evidence. I watched what was introduced during the course of the trial. There is no explanation that I've heard that's valid as to why you would be walking away from that burning car. You know, those photos were not of a girl in a video enjoying life. Those photos of you grasping the breast that was ultimately shaved from her body, with her face plastered into that, I don't recall if it was the ottoman of the couch, the way that her body was positioned, there's no explanation for that. I don't need to rehash the evidence. I've gone through all my notes from this trial, and I think that Attorney Vance-Curzan did a nice job of summarizing in pertinent part the details. But there's no answer that you briefly provided in this pre-sentence that makes even a hint, that even resonates with a hint of truth. So how do we protect society from a man who clearly has had darkness in his past, who engaged in behavior that is, it's the facts that you see written in horror novels. That's what we have to determine. And you know, it isn't easy. I can tell you that when you think about, is there ever something redeemable in a person? You'd like to say at some point there is. And I can tell you that at the points in life where I've come to the conclusion that there isn't anything redeemable, you know, you do think about, I think it takes away a little piece of my soul. How come I couldn't find anything good? How come I can't find anything that I can say at some point you'll be a better person? So ultimately at sentencing, considering the seriousness of the offense, your character, and the needs of society. This is clearly not a probation case. Probation would unduly depreciate the seriousness of the offense and isn't even allowable under our law. You are sentenced to a term of life imprisonment, and that is what the penalty is for a jury of your peers ultimately coming back and convicting you on first-degree intentional. In this case, I didn't see a restitution request.
We are asking for a restitution hearing, and we've pre-selected a date.
Thank you. We'll be setting restitution off to be determined at a later date. Relative to this matter, I have considered the seriousness of the offense. As to my sentence, relative to the nature of the offense, you are not eligible for challenge incarceration. You're clearly not eligible for any substance abuse programming. Restitution will be determined at a later date. You do need to submit a biological specimen to the state crime lab and pay the surcharge thereof. You do have the right to appeal, and if indigent, you have the right to the assistance of the public defender. What you need to understand is that a notice of intent to pursue post-conviction relief must be filed in the trial court within 20 days after sentencing for your rights to be preserved. You have been convicted of a felony. You may never possess a firearm. If you do, you're looking at 10 years of imprisonment, a $25,000 fine, or both. You may not possess body armor at any time in the future. If you do, you'll be subject to 15 years of imprisonment, a $50,000 fine, or both. You cannot vote in any election. I'm going to waive all non-mandatory fees, costs, and assessments. I'm ultimately going to want payment for restitution first and foremost. So we're going to determine that on a later date. But due to that, I'm not imposing any fine. The fees, costs, and assessments will be payable during your term of confinement at a rate to be determined by the DOC. Pretrial incarceration credit.
I'll get that information to you.
Okay. So relative to one moment. Count 3, arson of building other than arson of property other than building. That's a Class I felony. On that offense, you are looking at a fine of up to $10,000 or imprisonment for not more than 3 years and 6 months or both. Relative to that matter, the maximum is 18 months of initial confinement and 2 years of extended supervision. I am imposing 18 months of initial confinement and 2 years of extended supervision. One moment. As to count 2, which is a charge of mutilating a corpse, that's a Class F felony. That means upon conviction, you could be fined not more than $25,000 and imprisoned not more than 12 years and 6 months or both. Relative to that, the maximum is 7.5 years of initial confinement and 5 years of extended supervision. I am imposing 7.5 years of initial confinement and 5 years of supervision. Relative to count 1, that is a Class A felony, the charge of first-degree intentional homicide. Relative to that, you shall be sentenced to imprisonment for life. And relative to this matter, weighing all of the factors that I must, looking at the Galleon factors, considering your character, the severity of the offense, and the impact on the community, where you stole a truly shining light is what it sounds like. I am ordering that you will not be eligible for extended supervision. Counts 2 and 3 are consecutive to count 1. The date for the restitution hearing will be
September 4th at 10:30.
Have you determined?
Yes, excluding today's date, 484 days.
I will provide you with a written explanation of the determinate sentence for your review. State, what have I failed to address?
I think that's everything.
Defense, what have I failed to address?
Nothing further.
Celeste?
Nothing, Judge.
One moment, and I'll give you a copy. Each other to communicate more, maybe our world will be a better place. Just an idea. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.